when we talk about succession politics, how do we manage them in this country, right? I think before we took a short break, we were hearing from Professor Gisami, but just looking at that succession politics in the public office, it is not been a smooth sailing affair in this country, Kwame. Maybe we can put things into perspective, also look into the churches. SDA has been also on the fore as well, as far as, I don't know if it's succession politics or maybe just management of a church itself. So not everyone is spared in this country when it comes to succession. Are we prepared? Do we do it effectively?
Well, I think ensuring a smooth succession, especially in public offices, is the role of boards. The boards that are set up, because they're the ones who understand when anybody in management has a contract and when the contract expires, if they choose or if they have the opportunity to extend it, then it should be done well in advance. It helps with professional preparations of whoever is leaving or whoever is coming in and all that. So when you have what looks like a succession problem like we have at the Communications Authority, it's the board that we should squarely look at and say, look, this should have started much earlier. They knew very, very well they had somebody whose term was coming to an end. If they chose not to extend it, as they say, the law does not allow it, then perhaps they should have started this recruitment much, much earlier. There's nothing wrong in starting recruitment much, much earlier. I think this tells you the same problem we have with the Office of the Auditor General and the Control of Budget. Everybody knew that this was a one-term, 8-year single term, not subject to any extension. So we should have started all this much, much earlier. So all this says is you cannot blame any of the individual candidates. I think what you need to do is just ask yourselves that these boards did not do their job well enough, whether it's because they were unprepared or whether they had an interest in specific outcomes in the process. I think we shouldn't question, but it's very, very clear that these issues are ending up in court partly because the boards didn't do their jobs well enough. So the chairs and the other board members should take responsibility.
Is it for Wangusi to tell us that, yes, the person who's to take over, she's not really qualified?
No, I think that's a very unfair comment that came from him. He's not, because
he's not there.
The appointment of his successors, the appointment of his successor is not his business. Because if he says that he thinks a certain person is not qualified, it is possible that his predecessors could have thought him unqualified as well. So that kind of...
But I think he has a responsibility. He has a responsibility to have groomed.
Yes.
Yeah. The succession. That one should have come in. But he has no opportunity, no authority to say who is.
Yeah. And also the immunity that comes from, his own person as, this person can't take over, is not qualified. I mean, this is the cultural issues we are talking about. We have immunity in everything. Everything we touch, whatever it is we want. He knew that this time was coming to an end. Yes. So clearly, you should have known that if there is no clear succession plan, as Secretary says, then you should let the course go through. Because now making all of this, what we are seeing is what our children are learning from us. He's screaming on the screen, on the media that he's not handing over, he's going to court and all that, and this person, this lady is not, qualified to take. And these people are watching, children are watching. My mother is not qualified to do that. We are teaching our children bad manners.
No, we have bad manners. Were they also trapping a tribal card here? Because this is what, it seems Wangusi is trying to also front. They're saying, she's not qualified. Look at the board members, look at the board chair, look at the person they're appointing.
Debal, I think Wangusi is just going to pour very cold water on what he has done. In fairness to him, I think he has presided over that digital migration of the telecommunications in this country, and he has done a good job. But I think these last 2 weeks comments from him and the statement really are very unfortunate and something that he should have actually avoided. For me, I think the issue of who is qualified and who is not, it should not arise. I mean, he has done his tour of duty, he has finished, he should exit in an acceptable manner. This is a very untidy exit. But I'm also convinced that failing to plan to fail. If you look at this institution that has such great responsibility in the country, to find it in this impasse, in this situation where they are not able to actually determine or smoothly hand over, it is a very unfortunate state. And for me, I think he should retract a lot of what he has said in the last week, accept his tour of duty is over, take the accolades that go with his with his work and move on, rather than, and remove his vested interest. Because sometimes also, overstaying in an institution makes you feel like you are the institution and the institution is you. So you own it. And that's why you find people saying, I'm not quitting. But it's not your institution. As Dwale would tell them, see yule aliyekuzaa. Yes, because really it is a public institution. Run it as such and accept that. But also let's look at the planning of the appointing authority, because there is also something that is systemic in our country that is coming over and over, that we don't seem to want to plan and accept that Moreu's tour of duty will exit, will come to an end, and he must hand over. I did that in the Kenya National Chamber. I realized, going into an election may bring a lot of acrimony, so I handed over smoothly, and there has been continuity in the chamber. And that is what you should plan as a leader. Just allow succession to be smooth.
All right, Stanley.
Yeah. When you look at the whole issue of succession politics, I think there are two things that are emerging. The first thing is that, one, Kenyans generally, they are not prepared to exit or to retire. And then the second thing is that you realize that the appointing authorities are not eager to try and seek a replacement before the term ends. And this is a challenge that we are currently having. In fact, in a properly organized society, it will be that maybe 6 months before the term expires, the recruitment process has begun. That means that gives the exiting executive an opportunity to even hand over to the person who is coming. If you look at all these public entities that we have, you realize what ordinarily happens is that the term ends, and then somebody is appointed to act, and then thereafter, that's the time the recruitment process starts. And that is not the correct, that is really not the correct procedure. The only problem is that I don't know whether we need to legislate so that people can be able to observe this particular practice. But that is something that we have to look at. And the other problem is that some of these positions, you find that they're very enticing. Obviously, being a head of an institution, whether a church or whatever it is, we are talking about having money, power, and self-interest. And these are cultural issues that we are having as Kenyans. Now, on the issues of the wrangles, especially within the religious sector, I think two things are emerging.
We'll go to that. We'll go to that in a moment. But I just wanted also to pick, especially because this brings to the fore the whole issue about board management.
Correct.
That we saw. This is not the first time that Wangusi has been at loggerheads with the boards. We remember also, I think in 2017, where he was ousted out of office, and he actually, went to court. He wrote into their, into his, some of the things that were there in his affidavit were. He says it is worth noting that even the board, members of the board, other than the chairperson and the appointees of the cabinet secretary, he has been, going hammer and tongs on this particular board. So it has not been smooth sailing since also he was actually, taken back to his office until now his tenure ended. But board management in this country, when we're talking about corporate governance, I think also brings to question the issue of succession as well.
They go through this MWONGOZO anyway. I don't know why they don't implement it. They are trained.
Okay, you see, I will not really blame Wangusi for doing that, because with the opening up of the democratic space, and if you feel that your right has been infringed upon, he had every right to go to court, and the court had to make a pronouncement on whatever it is that he was complaining about. But the question is that when you look at the board, we have to look at the accountability aspects of the board. We are having boards that simply are not doing its job, their job. Something like succession planning should be actually part of the performance contracting of each and every board member as something that they're supposed to be actually assessed or appraised on, such that we don't have to wait for a situation like now what has presented itself before they start seeking a proper person to succeed the executive who is leaving. Yeah.
There's something I wanted to point out here. I think
you've teased the issue of MWONGOZO code.
Yeah, it's a question
but
of
who even knows what is domiciled within the MWONGOZO code itself, within the public sector.
Francis,
unless now you from the Kenya School of Government.
Francis, chair, who is my buddy. We are the same RICA. They have gone all through this. We were with him the other day. I don't know how many times I've gone. MWONGOZO. It tells you succession planning. You have to. And I think what I'm impressed, because I know I have the inside of this because I worked for them, someone that was working for them. But Francis, by the way, Francis is a very qualified man. He has special talent than anybody in this country. the space, whatever you call it, taking people to the moon. So I think you have another responsibility you can do. Now, what you find here, and I think we should look at the gist of the matter, it's, I think the appointing officer should probably have done things differently. CA is an independent body. Therefore, getting the board members, appointing the board members, probably would have gone through a different process. And that's why the issue came in. Now, Francis, on his part, if he did it to tenure, he even had an extension, should have actually left. The issue with Mercy, and by the way, Mercy, you see Mercy, she's a South girl, and the others who are South in that institution. My biggest challenge here is, why don't we implement the things we have gone through? Yeah. Very clear in MWONGOZO that Gene should have done A, B, C, D. My brother comes and say, let's go.
But you as a chair of the Kenya School of Government right now,
yes,
you're the person who should be telling us what you're trying to do, is to inculcate what has been also teased out within the MWONGOZO code. I think the public officers, they come to your school to learn all these things.
Stanley pointed a very interesting point, that every time you are being assessed as a board, as a CEO, that's something you should look for. And it's actually things to be implemented at the Kenya School Government. Now, the question is, and I think it goes across here, things are very clear in paper, but how much do we implement of it? And I think he brought a very interesting, there are two things in my view which comes into every Kenyan in succession. We have this problem that I'll never leave office. And I can tell you, I went through the same process myself as acting.
You didn't want to leave office?
I didn't want to. Secondly, and I think Diba is very important, we think we are indispensable.
Yes.
And you know, God forbid, you leave today, a week you have somebody seated there.
No, a week, same day.
Same day. Somebody will be seated questioning.
Yes.
I'm
refusing to leave.
But on the issue of MWONGOZO.
Yes.
But let me make clear, I left when my retirement age, I left on my 2 terms. I left the office. Yes.
Okay.
So
on the issue of MWONGOZO, you know, when MWONGOZO came actually to operation by it was, I think, Executive Order number 7 of 2015, whereby after a task force that was given the responsibility to go through the management of public sector entities. And what happens is that all board members, during their induction process, they are taken through the MWONGOZO code. Yes. But the problem is that we do not have a mechanism to enforce adherence to that code.
Yes.
It has basically become a wish list. And if you look at that particular document, the way it was prepared, it has got basically everything from the board appointment, board recruitment, members, even the numbers, and then the issues of the qualifications, the CEO appointment, issues of audits. They have got about 6 or 7 thematic areas that are very, very good. Yes. The only problem we have is the cultural issue. They'll be taken through, they'll be taken to Mombasa or wherever. They go through all these things. At the end of the day, they pack them and then they do not implement. The problem is that there is no auditing process or procedure to ensure whether the board members actually are there to those. Succession planning is one of the issues that has been outlined in the MWONGOZO code. But all these boards, the way we are seeing, what are they doing?
What are they doing? Kwame, so let's come to the church, because that is the public. What about the church?
Just 1 minute on this MWONGOZO. I attended the MWONGOZO training when we were appointed as board members. But sadly also, you will find, and I noted, and I don't know whether Wainaina agrees with me, but if you notice, all the major parastatals, big parastatals, were not there. Their boards were not attending these MWONGOZO. They are too big for this MWONGOZO. And they lose it big time. They fail to actually implement what is supposed to be implemented. So they don't attend, they don't know, they act with impunity. So really, it must be mandatory, and it must be everybody across the board. But some people did not attend. We saw so many vacant, all these big parastatals. They don't come there, they don't know, and they don't want to know. So it's a systemic issue.
Systemic issue.
Yes, yes.
Let's hear from Kwame. I want to just also pick out the Daily Monitor in Uganda.
Yeah.
When it comes to succession politics, this is how serious also. You know, Kazimbi elected the 9th Archbishop, right?
Yeah.
This is, of course, who's the new Archbishop. This is what we are struggling with here. Property, power, and the church. Questions over the multi-million shillings assets of the National Council of Churches of Kenya are likely to influence members' decision during the organization's meeting today. the contest is about who is taking over from Canon Karanja as well. So let's comment about succession plan also,
Yes.
not just in the public offices, also private and the parachurch ministries and NGOs as well.
Well, I think succession, as we said, I mean, as we've all talked about here, it's part of the responsible leadership. And obviously, if an institution is alive, by that I mean that its board adheres to its code and is responsible for ensuring handovers whenever the opportunities for that arrive, then that's part of it. So my view is that what's the culture, or rather what's the, I don't want to blame culture, to be honest, because we use culture very often as a convenient excuse for any time people don't do the things that they need to do. If you're working in a modern institution where you know that people work on the basis of contracts, those contracts state under what circumstances they would be renewed if renewal is required, and under what circumstances they would not be. We cannot then come back and say that we have contracts, but I'm thinking that culture requires me to hang on for much longer than I should. I mean, if there's an age limit to a job, there's an age limit to a job. What that means is if you get to 60 and your job says that you cannot serve beyond that, it's automatic. So I don't think we should litigate that. Whether it's a church...
I left at 60 years.
Yes, whether it's precisely. Whether it's a church, whether it's a cooperative society or an institution, an NGO or even civil society organizations or a private company like the one I work in. So I think these things are not necessarily that culturally done. It's actually just the board refusing to adhere to its own rules and part of that replacement. So that's the first. The second point about institutions and all this power is that every institution at its leadership makes you responsible for some resources and makes you have a lot of power as well within the institution. So you would understand the reluctance of somebody to depart or to try in an unfair way to determine who their successor is. And those are all things that the rules of the organization. In my view, I'm still talking about these things as about institutions. And institutions are not just organizations, they're also the rules about how people handle these processes. Thirdly, I don't think a dispute is necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes when you have disputes and they go through the formal processes of solving them, you then establish rules which allow people to know what the boundaries are. So if we have the Communications Authority problem solved, I know there are other matters in court out there that makes it even more complex whether the board is properly constituted or not. But if this issue is solved, it ensures that whoever comes in, their time to exit arrives, they will not have the same kind of arguments around, because that's how institutions grow. You examine challenges or what looks like a crisis. As soon as you've resolved it, at least you have a model that allows you to resolve it again in the future, and that institutions go ahead. So I don't necessarily look at these fights as bad things. I mean, we're all human beings and people tend to be status conscious, but the way they are resolved and the mechanisms through which they are resolved formally,
right.
I think
in the broad view of maybe the corporate governance,
Yes.
then do you think we really take it seriously? Because I think all these things, they're taken through the corporate governance, even from for the public sector, the listed companies as well. You talked about the MWONGOZO code for the public office. Yes. We have all the capital markets authorities, corporate governance codes as well. Yes. Do we implement these things truly?
Well, some institutions do, and I think one of the things we need to understand is also we have to, as much as we are talking about the negative outliers, such as the difficult situation we're now seeing with the Communications Authority, there are also institutions that do their formal handovers and contractual renewals very, very smoothly. So they exist. One of the things about it is we cannot decide that the entire corporate structure in Kenya is crooked, because we've seen a few. Though, of course, the Communication Authorities persistent problems tells you they have a big problem with their board. It's clear. It's clear they have a big problem with their board, and the fact that some other matters have not been resolved tell you that. But there are institutions that handle their succession and handle management appointments very, very competently.
Right. Yeah. Rachel.
But also when if I fall back to the MWONGOZO, it also, first of all, when they were giving it out to the public, when they were launching it, they said that they have done extensive consultations. So this is a code that must work. It also gave guidelines on how the boards must actually work, setting
Very
of
clear.
salaries. Everything is there. I've had an opportunity to read it. So it is, And, you know, when you look at from church to everywhere, it's not a question of really not having regulations or governance, you know, structures that govern
Correct.
these issues.
Correct.
It is the way we choose to implement them. Because I do believe that there is nobody who walks into a government office and works without some kind of letter of appointment or some contract. That contract normally stipulates under what conditions you are working and how you would exit or you would renew or so forth. So it's not culture, yes, but also we must remember that as human beings, even in the Bible, there were conflicts. It is how we also resolve these conflicts that will make a difference.
All right.
But I think the problem, as Kwame has said, saying that is really not about culture. But what I'm saying is that it's about our value system. We are simply a bad-mannered society. You realize that this is what is supposed to happen, but you just choose not to do it. The issues of impunity, you feel that you're not accountable to any person, and that is where the problem is. And especially this can be traced to public entities, public bodies. And even now, we have seen it getting into the church arena. You realize that multinationals, for instance, when you see multinational companies, because of the culture and the value system that they have instilled in their members, we don't have these problems. You realize when somebody's term is supposed to be exiting, they are supposed to be grooming somebody who's supposed to be a successor. And then that particular process of handover is properly controlled, and it happens. And these are by the same Kenyans. But when you come to the public space, and these other areas, we have that particular challenge. So I think it's something to do with the value system, and we need to have to fix it.
I have somebody in mind, Martin Oduor.
Just a moment. Let's hear from Murray, then we wind up with you on this, and we move on to another topic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, there is no alternative to planning succession. But you find as soon as somebody assumes an office, then they start developing self-interest in the whole institution. They own it. And in the process, then we have difficulties in their exiting. Now, you also find in cases such as the one that we are talking about, whether it's NCCK or the CA, the extension of the sitting chief executive like we have now cannot be a secret. It must be given early enough, and if it's not being given early enough, then it is the signs are on the wall that you are exiting and your succession is planned accordingly. But I'll give you an example of the former Zimbabwean president, Mugabe, once was asked, when are you going to bid the Zimbabweans farewell? And his question to the reporter or the person who asked us was, where are they going? Because for him, he had not planned to quit. But you saw what happened. When he refused to quit, the masses took over and he quit shamefully. He was the independence father of Zimbabwe. Look at how he left his office. And so there is a price to pay when you refuse to stick, to leave gracefully. If Wangusi left gracefully, we would remember him for the good things. These last 2 weeks, I think he has messed big time.
Right.
So really it's about refusing to have that power. Leave your heart to your head.
Right. From let's
Yeah,
wind up on it.
I think there's something I want to bring here. And I think in terms of succession and governance, if you do 2 terms, you probably do 5 years. And is that pegged on your strategic plan? You have 5 years. If you have done strategic plan for institution, you have given enough. And I think what comes to my mind, Kwame, probably somebody like Martin Oduor. Came in KCB, did his 2 terms, and he left. Martin is enjoying doing something good in there. There's something I want to bring about the church. Karanja has actually been over 13 years in that office. Over 13 years. But let me take another angle, perhaps, Deba, you should have brought. I think there's 2 things. I think there's a point the board should take responsibility. If I was in KQ today, I would resign. In fact, how can you be in a board and every year you are making losses? You saw yesterday.
Yeah, 8.6
It's
billion.
gone up again in terms of the deficit. What's that board doing there? As a chairman, Michael, Joseph, and the other board members, you must, I don't know what's so in them. How can you sit in an institution? You can't turn it around. Resign. Let other Kenyans come and do it. And I think you can turn that plate. The reasons we are giving, it's just like the church itself. It's just like the institution we are talking about. And I think there's a certain, and I started this discussion, there's a certain level of personal responsibility. I was given a task to turn this company around. I was given the task to make sure that Mureu becomes the next CEO. If I don't deliver it, leave.
All right. Instead, we'll add you bonuses, especially the CEOs and
unexplained extensions.
After you've reported these losses as well. But as we're winding up, there's a very important issue maybe that you need to address. Just very briefly, maybe one of you, the issue of appointments and the acting capacity maybe of the appointee. Because we've seen in this country people actually sitting in an office as in an acting capacity for over 6 or even 10 good years. Case in point is political parties, even you are in city parties.
Yes.
Yeah. But there is a bill that is actually coming to the fore. A year?
Yeah, over a year.
Over a year. But we saw also there are people actually who are still in an acting capacity for over even 4 years. And there is a bill actually that seeks actually to address this, that you can be in office for only 6 months in an acting capacity. Maybe, Kwame, you can wind up on it briefly, since you started.
You know, for me, I actually think that the status of any institution should depend on what the board does. Because, I mean, as a board, there's something also about the kind of mind you have when you know that you're acting. Because if you're acting, there's a tentativeness, and you can't make very firm long-term decisions because you don't know whether somebody who will come in will actually try to hold you responsible or even reverse them. And it's irresponsible for a board to allow that to end. Because one of the things that a chair should say, even if somebody else is the appointing, is to say, look, once 6 months have passed, we will assume person X as confirmed. So that they can go ahead with it. Because it's also not fair to the people who's sitting in there, because they too have career plans to consider. And if you're telling them that we are keeping you, we are not asking you to leave, we are not confirming you, but we're also not giving you certainty about whether this position will be confirmed or not. It's really, really unfair if you've been serving for more than a year whether in government or anywhere else, in an acting capacity, and you don't know, you cannot make alternative plans. So I think that's something that should end. But again, it comes back down to the board itself.
Right, thank you.